describe the claims yet, and I'm here to talk with you about quantum computers and blockchain. Now, it was expected that it would still be 4 to 10 years before there would be any real quantum risk to blockchain, that there wouldn't be any way that blockchain could be attacked by quantum computers. But that number got shortened by 3 to 5 years. And why is that? Especially since, the hardware has been progressing at the expected rate. So experts reviewed a series of documents, and after reviewing these documents, we're all pretty much in agreement that we're now looking at the year 2026 or the year 2027 when Bitcoin becomes threatened, Satoshi's old coins become vulnerable, Ethereum, Solana, and other chains are all, experiencing an increased risk every single week, every single month. What is that risk? Well, when a quantum computer looks at a transaction, it's able to take that public key and convert that into your private key, which then allows them to spend the money from that wallet, even though the transaction has already been completed, or in the case of Bitcoin, it has to cache it in transit. Caching it in transit is much harder because you have to solve it in 10 minutes. Now, Satoshi's old coins, as well as a few million old Bitcoin, are all vulnerable and lost using an older address file, so there's still vulnerable, and it would still massively crash Bitcoin. And if those public keys were converted into the lost private keys and then sold in the market. So what changed if it wasn't the hardware? The hardware has just been progressing as expected. The algorithms have been lowering the hardware requirements year after year. And those algorithms have gotten very good. Last year, in 2023, Litinsky published a paper that altered the way we think about Shor's algorithm and how it can be sped up. Now, if you were to take and you were to figure out what size of a quantum computer do I need, how big does it have to be before it can begin to use physics to solve this problem? The answer was, for a long time, billions of qubits, and then a few 100 million qubits. And we've only made machines or little robots. So it wasn't a real risk at the time. Litinsky's paper documented how to use a bunch of the hardware we made last year and use them to solve Bitcoin and Ethereum and elliptical curve cryptography, which includes ZK and some fully homomorphic encryption and a bunch of other things that we'd use, like even the further authentication system for MISs, all websites, SSL. All of those things are becoming more and more vulnerable by having a series of computers. Now, Litinsky's paper said that the minimum requirement was 1152 qubits. And with 1152 qubits, and a lot of the machines, not just one, but a lot of them, you're able to solve Bitcoin and other elliptical curves. Now, there was several innovations that he put into his symbol for groundbreaking paper. The first main innovation was how he was handling the math and preparations in order to make the actual calculations done. Very innovative. A lot of things that were done in that paper changed the way that the computation would cost less and happen faster in multiple ways. For example, when you started the calculation, instead of zeroing out the information and then doing another load, you did something like calculating the inverse of the previous answer into the next one, and you could just load the next question on top of the previous answer. And that technique was a massive performance gain. It was a big savings. It was a huge shift in just the way that the algorithm was going to run. If you look on the older estimates, Qt has a resource estimator. If you have a Microsoft developer account, they'll let you use QSharp to estimate how many qubits do I need for a specific thing. And they don't include any of these performance increases. They don't include any of these techniques. And the estimates that they use are several years old. And the estimates are getting better year after year because we're able to do basic mathematics faster. We're able to, as Litinsky says, borrow from the literature in order to come up with a better answer that someone else has already figured out. Now, the second part to this, instead of having one giant machine that no one can make, with 100 million qubits, for example, by having a considerable number of machines all working towards the same goal, we are able to spread out the problem. And if you watch his YouTube lecture on how the algorithm functions, he talks about different ways into storing memory and performing basic computations. And he takes advantage of this technique they call active volume. Active volume allows these computers to cooperate on a single task far more efficiently than silicon computers can cooperate today. So he took one of the things quantum computers were weakest at and turned it into one of their greatest strengths: the ability to cooperate on a task. Now, we still need a certain threshold before you can begin to load the problem, but those thresholds are changing and the thresholds are lowering, and the algorithms are getting more and more efficient. So those two changes would have resulted in a 3 to 5 year reduction in how long it would take before we could solve elliptical at 256 bits on quantum computers. That's 3 to 5 years right off the top. And since the estimates were hovering around 2030, 2031, and that brings us pretty close. Now, the second thing that makes this a real crisis is that those computers are currently in mass production. There are 3 different companies that are making systems in mass production now. I don't mean small, little, hobbyist devices or, things that can run on Raspberry Pi. There's actually a bunch of you just run on Raspberry Pi. But they're emulators at best. Some of them are just 2 qubits and you get to turn it on and see, hey, look, we've got 2 qubits. There's nothing you can do with that. And turn it right back off again. What I'm talking about is manufacturing of devices that perform at scale. And those 3 companies are PsiQuantum, Intel, and Oxford Ionics. And that's at the time of this recording. Now, PsiQuantum came up with this design where they're using photonics. And photonics is a single photon that's entangled with another photon. They're emitted at the same time. They join together in entanglement, which just means that they kind of, what happens to one happens to the other. And then after entanglement, they go through a series of gates, they perform the calculation, and then they get tested. So the photonics are resistant to heat, radiation, cell phones. Then they work very stable at room temperature. You're not worried about a laser bending because of a phone call. Those photonics still need to be measured at 2 to 4 Kelvin, which is pretty cold. But when you look at the computers from last year, IBM and Allen Computing, they both ran at 0.002 Kelvin, which is, much, much colder. By comparison, 2 to 4 Kelvin is a little bit colder or a little bit warmer than outer space because of the background of microwave radiation. There's a temperature to space, and this is around that temperature. So those devices that read the photons, those have to be cold, but they don't have to be very, very cold. So it takes a lot less power to operate, and it's far less expensive. Now, the second company, Intel, they're making these wafers, and they'll put a whole bunch of electrons on a wafer. I don't know, it's much smaller than this, and each of these will be left, right, entangled with each other. And this system, this wafer, is going to function as one quantum computer. The thing that they haven't done is put the algorithm on the chip on that wafer. The wafer is just what they say for test purposes, but they're making thousands of them very quickly. And so if they do get to the same place where they get to run algorithms. They're able to perform calculations and do networking. Well, then very suddenly you would have some breaking news that Bitcoin is broken with almost no notice. So that risk is anytime they finish that scientific research. And those devices are probably running at 0.002 Kelvin also, which means they have to have helium-3 and helium-4 radioactive isotopes chilled with lasers, and it's very hard to keep that system cold. The last large chip in mass production, the third company would be Oxford Ionics, and they're currently in mass production with a 256 qubit architecture, and instead of running on with helium or liquid hydrogen, they actually run at room temperature. Now there will be several changes that are required before you can actually run Shor's algorithm on these devices. The first is that there would have to be significantly more than 1,000 qubits based off of the amount of qubits that are reserved for just the communication. The second is that there have to be some kind of error correction built into the devices. And the third is that they would have to be networked. Now, those systems are available, so we know a little bit more about their capabilities. Intel's wafers, we see that they have better than manufacturing. They'll read on them, we don't know how big they are. We extrapolate to get some information. Is it cryogenetic? So they're keeping it very cold. Our physicists know that electron spin is probably occurring 0.002 kilo. So there's this mass production now of a machine that is of the same size that Intel and Atom Computer already made. The big advantage of the Cyclone Atlas is that they can just keep making these modules and then add them together. We'll call horizontal scalability if you have a networking background. And this horizontal scalability means they just keep adding machines and keep getting increased performance. They can solve new and better, bigger problems by keep adding the machines. Now, there's a principle in quantum computing where if you can do something within a few qubits, you can often add more qubits to solve that problem faster. So the first break of the 256-bit elliptical curve will be done using a discrete log, and that discrete log is run Shor's algorithm. There's a minimum threshold to pass, and then you can actually begin solving problems at that size. We're hoping that they attempt to, give us warning and solve a 32-bit elliptical curve early. That way it prepares them doing the 256-bit elliptical curves. Now, when they do this elliptical curve and crack, the first one might be done with 8 or 10 million qubits, but it won't be done in a few minutes. It'll be done in a few hours. And it'll probably be barely stable. It might be stable, it may not be. It may have to run it a few times. But by simply adding more qubits, the amount of time it takes for them to actually perform the calculation goes down very rapidly. So once they hit around 50 million qubits, the thing that used to take hours now takes minutes. And when they have enough qubits, they'll be able to solve Bitcoin in less than a minute on average. Now, I mentioned before that the first break is different from taking the line off of the wire. When they're first able to solve the elliptical curves, blockchains that have a permanent address, like Ethereum or Solana, those machines will be easier to attack. Those blockchain networks have a record that you can just easily read in order to figure out the address to attack. Now, Bitcoin, it changes the address after a transaction. So if you're talking about current Bitcoin, you actually need to be fast enough to grab the data off of the block, off of the transaction from the mining pool, and then solve it, and then submit a new transaction with their same public-private key and send the money to yourself instead. So the UTXO model was designed to be quantum resistant. It is. but that just means they need more of a machine before Bitcoin is completely boated. We'll talk next time about more of what this means to the economy, what Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other blockchains can do in order to be safe. Thank you for joining us.